business, which will be a rotating and prescribed agenda that we will have to stick to because of the timeline that we're on. And then the old business will be, revisiting those items that we haven't completed, and then hopefully checking them off our list as we go, so those items don't become overwhelming. And all of this is going to be done in an absolute maximum of 2 hours at every meeting, or less. And tonight will be less, but we will endeavor to get through this in an orderly way. I would only ask that everybody come to the meetings as prepared as possible by reviewing the materials that we're going to be talking about, so that expedites the evening's activities. And I will note that 6 o'clock is the time that Eric had suggested earlier, but if 6 o'clock is tough, we could always make it 6:30 like a lot of other committees are. If that's better for you guys, it's fine with me. I just was going with what was prescribed, so welcome your thoughts there.
6 can be a challenge for me, but I can try and make it. 6:30 is usually easier, and it's just the nature of me getting out of work and being able to get back to here at home. But if 6 o'clock is what works best for everybody else, I can usually make it. It's just I'll probably look a little hurried and rushed, and I may even still have a tie on, but I can take that off.
Okay.
6:30 would be a little bit better for me too, but like Matt, I can make it work. So.
Okay.
I can do either. My preference is 6, but I'm flexible.
All right. Well, if you have thoughts about it strongly, just send me an email and or let me know later, and we'll adjust it as we need to. I'm also leery of, in the past, although I can't say anything about recent history, but in the past I've been at some public meetings and they go on forever. So and into the wee hours, and so I'm leery of. I get tired earlier. So
we don't do that anymore, Henry.
Clearly not. It's not nothing. Anyway, are there any other? So tonight, what we're going to do for new business is I'm going to just go through the process spreadsheet that I had provided you, and I can share my screen since I think we're all on Zoom together here. That won't take long. We'll then, do the assignments, and all of you already signed up for your slots. There's a couple of questions I have, and there are no slots to fill, so that's great. I think there's 1 or 2 that I just want to check with you guys to move it around, just to make sure that we're clear there. And then we want to do 2 new things tonight. One is a public participation plan. That's really a discussion. I'd like to wait for Dennis to get on the call before we start talking about that. And then Charles is here tonight from KV-COG, and he will be at all of our meetings, either he or Joel or both of them. And he's going to present the first section that we need to look at, which is the historical and archaeological resource section. And so he's just going to present his quick thoughts on that. It won't take more than, hopefully more than 5 or 10 minutes to do that. Then we're going to turn to the mission vision statement, and we're going to try to hack out a revision. And I've offered some suggestions based upon all of your comments. Most of you replied with lots of details, which was helpful. And I've provided all that back to you for your absolute exciting reading pleasure. And I know all of you spent hours looking at it all because it was just so enthralling. But I do think there was some great stuff in there, so we'll talk about that tonight. So that's the agenda. So let's get going. Are there any other comments or announcements from anybody before we go?
I just have a quick one. I may have to drop off at 7.
Okay.
For a bit, and then maybe I can get back on, but we may even be done.
Okay. No problem, of course.
Henry, I just want to let people know that given the interest that the board or the committee had in the public process, I am recording this meeting, and I do anticipate that if the committee would like to continue, I would like to continue to record all of these and have them available on the website for people to review.
Fine.
Good idea.
I think that's a great idea. Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
Yeah, and if somebody has a problem with that, then they can take the video off their screen or something. All right. process review. I can either share my screen or you can just, I don't know what that does to the recording if I do that. Probably nothing. It probably just,
It'll just show the screen. So yeah, feel free to share. I've enabled it for you.
okay, great. I'm just opening the file so I can get to the correct piece here. Where's that little button now? Here it is. You'd think I'd be an expert at this at this point, don't you think?
I've had 3 Zoom meetings already today.
All right,
I'm
can you
sorry,
see
Matt.
anything?
Yep.
You got a spreadsheet. Yep.
Oh, great. Fabulous. So I'm assuming you all took a look at this, so I don't need to go through it in incredible detail, but I just wanted to, and if you haven't looked at it, you have it in your email, so you can peruse it at your leisure. But I just wanted to make sure you understood what we were trying to propose. And I will say that Eric, Matt, and Joel and Charles and I looked at this pretty carefully. So we did that sort of in the last few weeks to make sure that we were capturing things. And this is not set in stone. It can move around a bit, but I wanted to give you something that was a timeline so you could understand kind of where we were heading and which sections we were going to do in what order. And so tonight, for example, these are the things we're going to be talking about. And then you will note a couple of months later, that section comes back for discussion. That's what this old item discussion means. And so you'll see these items moving in and out, and you'll see a couple of them even return a couple of times. For example, the future land use or the land use and the future land use appears multiple times throughout the process. And that's intentional because that's sort of that's probably the biggest piece that we have to deal with, and it's an ongoing discussion. So I just wanted to sort of lay that out for you all so you could understand it. The end frame here has also got some extra months, if you will, that are available. So if we get stuck on something or we need another month to do something, we will have that ability to be flexible. The objective here is to get it done by the early fall timeframe next year, and that gives the state review process and also the final public outreach and the needed warrant notification process time in order for it to be on the ballot at the November 22 election. So we figured that, that seems to be the most realistic and comfortable, and then we don't feel too pressured as a group. Are there any questions or concerns about that?
Henry, thanks to you and the team for doing this. I find it very helpful to see this all together. And I love the staggering of the new items over into the old items column, so we don't lose track of them. And there's clear focus on follow up, finish up, make decisions.
Right.
I like it.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, so you can also see, if you look this way, you can see which meeting, you can see at a particular meeting what's going to be talked about. And I think that's also helpful for your mental planning purposes. I did make an error in that there's no asterisk, so you don't know what it means. But the asterisk that you see on here means that the census data is actually required in order to complete that section. So you'll notice those asterisks have been bumped down a little bit. The first one's later this year because we just don't have that information. So that's why that's what that means. I then asked each of you, or we asked each of you, to pick some sections, and these are in alphabetical order. They're not in order in which they're presented to the committee or to the community. You'll have to refer back to the timeline for that. But here you can see where I've placed people in their slots as they have requested some interest. It doesn't mean that that's the final person. I just wanted to make sure it was clear that these were the slots that you were you had asked to be in. It worked out pretty nicely. So there weren't any major catastrophes. There's a couple of decisions we have to make tonight. I will just point out two things. There's a column here that talks about what I'd ideally like is a single person to be the primary role person that's responsible for making sure the stuff gets communicated, and I'll talk about what that means in a second. But so where we have two people, I'd love to have just one person be in that slot, and then the other people that have expressed interest in helping with that will just get moved over to the other the other people that would be part of that process. So you'll see David, we'll just use you, David, as an example, not to pick on you, but I'll use you as an
Oh.
example. You generously signed up for 3 slots. So I didn't know what to do with myself. But clearly one of those slots here, public facilities and services, was your first choice,
No.
according to your email. And so, or at least a choice that, oh no, sorry, not you. I was thinking, the local economy. That's what it was.
Yeah.
The local economy, right?
Yeah.
And so, it may be that, you and Jessica can just decide. You don't have to decide tonight, but you should decide, who wants to be the true lead. It doesn't really matter. I'm not trying to make this complicated or over process oriented. I'm not an engineer, even though I may sound like one through this exercise, but the idea is that one person is the point, and then the other person supports that with the discussion. And so here you've got you clearly being in a supporting role with these other efforts here, with Greg leading one and Remain leading the housing one, for example, and David, you contributing to that as you see fit, and I can explain what that would mean. So if we just look down here, Matt and Paula, I've got you as sort of basically the dynamic duo for the land use categories, I'll call it. I mean, Paula is the chair of the planning board, so it could either be Paula in the seat or you, Matt, in the seat. It doesn't really matter because I know you guys work closely together and it'll be fine. I noticeably did not put myself in that role because I need to stay. I have one section that I've taken, but I'm also on the planning board, but I want to be available to all the sections so I can float around a little bit. And that's really what my intention was. So Matt and Paula, did you have a preference, or you can ballot out later? It's up to you.
What do you think, Paula?
I think I had mentioned to you in an email, Henry, that the future land use plan and the land use and the built environment sections are not really separate. They're basically the same thing.
Yeah.
The land use and built environment section, the narrative is one thing, but all the other sections have goals and so forth with them. That particular section relies upon the future land use plan section for its goals. And so they really are the same. It's not like they're 2 separate efforts.
Yeah. And go ahead.
The land use maps obviously they're related, but they're a separate discrete piece of work. So
Yep.
those are separate.
Yeah.
They are, with the exception of the future land use map. That one map is very much tied to the same categories.
Mm-hmm.
But the other ones, I agree. The other maps that are in there, as far as that Henry has listed, the land cover, the transportation. Actually, those maps, I think, go well with their sections.
Yeah, and KV Cog will develop and edit and produce those maps.
Yeah,
so,
and I do want to, if I could, Henry, if I could speak to Matt's point, I think that's something I do want to try to do rather than present all the maps separately from the chapters. I think it would be a really different approach than most comp plans that I've worked on, where they throw all the maps at the end. But if we can kind of work on them together, it makes my life easier in terms of spacing the GIS out, so I'm not staring at a computer, but also we can see the text and also visualize it as well.
Right.
Okay. Well, that seems very logical to me, Paula and Matt. What do you think?
Yes, I agree. It's each of those chapters is going to have both a text component and a visual component that's going to include, in my opinion, maps, graphs and charts, and hopefully some photos. So I think that each of the chapters should include all of those elements when the discussion is happening.
Yeah. Okay. I'll revise this then later we don't have to do it right now, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Okay. And then, so to just go back to Paula's point here. Yeah, I fully acknowledge that is, I agree with you. You're the expert much more than I am on that. And I totally understand that. I think we were looking at it more from just an authorship perspective, but land use in general, those 3 sort of categories as they're currently authored in the document. Those are sort of all interwoven together, I would agree, but they're also they're not going, it's not like a discrete, all the other chapters are sort of a fairly discrete thing. Those chapters sort of interweave through the whole process. And so it's sort of like an ongoing piece through the entire comp process, particularly the future land use piece.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to acknowledge that I agree with you basically.
And from a lead role, Paula, I don't mind us essentially, if it's okay with you, just tag teaming on that.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine with me. That discussion, a lot of that work obviously will be with planning board input. And so we can just both be there too.
I'm excited to attend some planning board meetings.
And we're going to rope you back before you know it, Matt.
Homecoming.
So here you can see, let's just quickly go. Thank you for that discussion. So coming down here, if you see a duplication, we don't have to do it tonight, but maybe you could talk to the other person. So David and Jessica, if you could get together and just decide, unless you want to do it right now. And then here with the outdoor and rec situation, which involves a lot of different components, we have great interest from multiple people. So maybe you guys could just think about who might be a logical person to take the driver's seat there. The only person who isn't, the only two people who don't have a driver's seat then would be Gary and Sean. And Sean's not here tonight, but Gary, you're here. So I mean, that may be something that Gary, you'd want to take the lead on, and the others can support you on that, for example.
It works
if you had the time.
Yeah.
Henry, I'd urge Jessica to be the lead on the local economy. She has a seat on the current enterprise committee. So I think that's just a very strong position from which to lead this.
I am happy to do it and happy to get your help on it, David. So.
Okay, great. Yeah, just because you're not the lead doesn't mean you're not involved. You're going to be very.
I'll make you do work.
Don't worry.
No.
I just want to make it very transparent what you guys are signing up for. So, Gary, you don't have to answer now, but if you give it some thought and we can.
Well, Henry, I've just jumped up from Windows 7, where my computer crashed, to Windows 10, and I'm a danger right now. So with that, and I'm learning a lot. So I'd rather not be a leader until I know how to even run this thing.
Fair enough. Got it. You're in the supporting, but very important supporting role.
Okay,
So
well, I've got my daughter coming up in 2 weeks, so hopefully I can get a little more proficient.
Yeah. Well, you're going to be very involved in that section anyway, just because of the Trails Committee and the other things that are associated with it.
Okay, thank you.
It'll be great. All right. Enough of that. So thanks for that.
Henry, can I add to this is the way you're anticipating this running and the way we talked about is that these individuals obviously would be the lead on each of these, but obviously the whole committee is going to get an opportunity to talk in detail about all of these things. So just so that everybody doesn't feel as though or has a clear understanding that each and every one of these chapters is going to get detailed group discussion, and it'll be an opportunity for the group to add to all of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Henry, just to make sure I'm clear on the direction you're coming from with this, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of what we're doing here is that those people assigned to a particular section would be responsible for gathering input from the relevant boards, commissions, individuals, and putting that in some order to bring it back to this group for discussion.
Yeah. That's exactly right, Paula. And the theory being that if this is one, it's engaging all of us on the committee in some ownership of this process, which I think is very important. We were all appointed to this committee for a reason, and we all need to be engaged in it. And I have no doubt that we are. And two, that we can actually then not overload each other. You know, we prevent the one person dominating the process, and I think that's very important as well. So let's take. So you're right, Paula. So let's take the next section. So Greg has graciously agreed to be to take on the lead for the historical piece as one of his interests. With David, you also thinking you might like to support that as an example. And this is the piece that will be presented tonight. So what will happen is at every meeting, there will be the section that will be presented, and KV Cog will take that section. They will provide comment on that section, as you will see tonight from Charles, and their thoughts about what is going on in other towns and what other components we may want to consider, or something that's absent from it that maybe we want to think about trying to add, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they'll go through that process. They then leave it with us. And then in this case, Greg and David, you guys then take it and you then work with the other entities. So in this case, it would be the Readfield Historical Society at a minimum, if not other interested historians in their community. And you would work with those other entities, in this case, just one that we've listed, but it could be others, and or other public entities that you see that fit, and try to gather all that information and essentially either receive comment back or write something up or revise the chapter yourself. I think we could be a little flexible on that. But the idea is you gather that information, as Paula said, and you bring it back to the committee when we do the review. And then that's going to be about a 2-month window. It comes back to the committee, and then once we talk about it, and then we sort of go through, you present it to us and KV Cog, and then if there's some leftover things that need to be done, those get cleaned up between then and the next meeting. But if not, the vast majority of that goes back to KV Cog. KV Cog, we're paying KV Cog. KV Cog will then author that section in a proper draft format, and they will then give it back to us in a revised package, if you will, for that section for you guys to then review and make sure it's concluding all the things you thought it would, and then goes to the committee in sort of a draft final, right? And then we set that aside until we get towards the end of the process. So we're checking off chapters as we go, and we're incorporating them into a bigger plan, which we will then revisit in a holistic sense towards the end. And when I say towards the end, I mean it's going to take months to go through it at the end, but that's the plan, is to at least address each of the chapters individually.
Henry, this is David. I was pleasantly surprised to see your format here with the other committee members supporting the lead, because the one phase of this project that concerns me the most is the final implementation, not just communication, but implementation and for engagement and the success of the plan. And so I think that having 2 or 3 committee members who are more engaged with the commission or committees or boards that are assigned the individual goals in the final plan, I think it's just going to be much more robust implementation and much more assured success. So I like this approach from start to finish.
Well, thanks for that. That's the idea. Time will tell if it's going to work out, and we're in a complete panic in 6 months. But I don't think so. I think it will be fine. But we need to remain nimble and flexible where we need to, and the timeline allows us to do that. But I also recognize that we want to have proper engagement. This also, I think it was unsaid but implied strongly, is that it really provides a lot of outreach to the community on these chapters, that we're forcing that public process to happen. And like I said, every meeting will also have opportunities for people from any part of the community or another board or committee to join and make those comments. So we'll try this, because I think it creates a lot of transparency. So are there any more? So I'm not trying to rush us through this. We have a lot to get through, so I just want to keep moving along. Is there any other questions or concerns on this?
Just me. This is Romaine.
Hi.
Hi. Just to make sure I'm understanding, the next one is housing, for example. And I'm, in my mind, housing options is an area where there's least going on in Readfield. I mean, I don't really know of anything. So it would seem to me that the process for that would be to kind of call out what was in the last comprehensive plan and see
Yep.
what's still relevant and what isn't, and then bring it to various groups. But I would
Yep.
see that as one area that might benefit from significant public participation, like one separate forum on housing options, or a focus on it at least, to hear from the public what
Sure.
they're
Yeah.
thinking.
I don't think there's any restriction on how many times we can talk about a particular topic. So, I mean, I think you're right. And the process you just described is correct. So, and it's up to you guys, and so we can talk about our public plan as well. But I mean, the idea there is that we do regular outreaches, and maybe there's some more broader emails we do concerning housing specifically, or maybe we do some specific outreach for housing. Is that if we feel that's one where we need a more robust piece. But keep in mind, Romaine, that KV-COG is going to provide you a lot of information that you can use to make your product better. Yeah, and Charles is going to add to that.
Yeah, and just I was going to kind of explain that tonight too. So, for example, this sheet in the outreach and input needed for the historical and archaeological resources, that's only the Readfield historical side. That provides a really hyper local look at it. But there's also the main historic planning commission, and there's a bunch of other people who we will also bring in, not like a significant amount, but I will definitely make additional recommendations as we approach it. And you'll see the way tonight I say we should double check a lot of this. History is an easy one, which doesn't change. So it's maybe not the best example, but
that's why we're starting with it, Charles, because it's easier than the others.
I like that. But it's just, I think, Romaine, to your point, I think it's some will require different types of outreach. So.
Okay, good. I'm good.
Okay.
I just have a quick timeline question. So the way you described it, like tonight we're doing the archaeological and historical section, and then after KV-COG gives us sort of their presentation on it, we'll go that's when the lead on each of these sections will go for outreach to the groups that have, to the populations that have stakeholder aspects. And then when we come back for the several months later for the discussion, that's when we'll be presenting what we've discovered.
Exactly. Okay. So for example, tonight we're talking about it as a new thing, and Greg and David are the two that are going to lead that for our committee.
Okay, well, that's my question. So if I'm doing natural resources, I should be prepared in July and already have had conversations with KV-COG and.
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily. You can, if you want to have some pre-discussions, you should, but you don't necessarily. For example, tonight, they definitely haven't had any discussions tonight before tonight's discussion. But basically KV-COG will present us with all that information, which will be before the meeting. You'll get copies of it, at least a week in advance, I think Charles said. And then at tonight's meeting, that will be talked about at that meeting. And then you'll see 2 months later, it comes back. So some sections are a little longer, but most of them are 2 months. We figure 2 months is enough time, at least just for that section. There may be things that then say, oh, that committee wants to work on something else and they're going to provide input in 6 more months. Well, that's fine too. But we want to we want to revisit it after that.
Right. So the outreach period is happening between the first time we talk about it and then we bring it back.
And we really want to conclude as many of them as we can. Some of them we're going to stretch out further, but if we can package one up and kind of set it aside, then we want to be able to do that.
Right.
The nice thing about having this, this schedule document in front of us as well that Henry has created and we're taking a look at is that it provides you an opportunity. If you know what it is you're going to be looking at 6 months from now or 3 months from now, you can start to think about it now, obviously, and spend some time, preparing yourself. Even if you don't have the material from KV-COG, we do already have the existing comp plan.
Right.
So make yourself extremely familiar with the existing comp plan section that you're going to be looking at, and take the opportunity to think about how you might tackle this when it comes up.
And I'm also happy to, I think for a chapter like natural resources, Jessica, I think it would be beneficial to kind of talk with that before as well. So I'm open to meetings and helping out, and being prepared is never bad. So
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
Are there any other significant questions or discussions or disagreements is really what I want to hear? I mean, you guys do you guys buy this process? I guess that's really
Good.
the key.
I like it.
Okay.
I love organization, and there's lots of that here.
Okay. Well, if you think of something after, just shoot me an email or give me a call or something. Okay, public participation plan. I really wanted Dennis here, so maybe Charles, maybe we'll skip to you now. We'll hold off on that for just a minute. Let's go to the historical and archaeological resources section. And Charles, if you could just present, briefly present your suggestions, and Greg and David pay close attention. You're on mute, Charles.
yeah, I'm just trying to set it up and then share.
Oh,
my
I can
screen.
share it if you can't, but you let me know.
Yeah, if you want to do it, that'd be great. So I can see if
Okay.
I can watch the people too.
It's a little intimidating, the process. Of course, now I just closed it, but I'll open it. Just hold on a second. I'll find.
Yeah.
Don't
But
pick.
I can start talking about it.
You bet.
So as I mentioned before, the history and archaeological resources hasn't changed much, and that's a safe assumption. But what would need to be addressed for this chapter is what has changed, what language has changed. And I didn't, just reading through the first one, the first draft, obviously I'm not fluent in Readfield history. There's some regional trends that we can pull. We just finished Fayette's and Monmouth's comp plan. So the regional history I'm pretty familiar with, but when it comes to specific Readfield things, I'm going to trust the comp plan. And I think this is just something that my general comment about this chapter is that we can kind of clean it up, maybe present it in a different way, kind of make it's great as is, but we can kind of revitalize it. Work with, I think the three is the Readfield Historical Society, the Maine Historic Planning Commission, and then there's one more I put in there and I can't remember off the top of my head, but we can scroll through it and we'll find out later. But I think our goal with this chapter is to enhance it with what was written in 2008, 2009, double check some of this information and maybe build to it to see what has been discovered in the last 10 years, or not really discovered, but what has been kind of digitized or added to it. And this is a really interesting chapter for that. Instead of making recommendations or really building it, we're trying to enhance this chapter. And one thing I do want to add to this is that first comment, for example, Native Americans, indigenous populations, I think there has been a lot of energy around kind of using the correct language. So that's one thing I'm going to look into, and making sure that we are using the appropriate, sensitive, and correct language. I've talked to a few of my friends from college who are more aware of this and kind of work in that field. And obviously things like when I was writing this about, 9-10 days ago now, the Readfield Union Meeting House restoration, I just linked the article there. So I think that's something we can kind of talk about, what work has been done in the last 10 years to preserve the history. Maybe even possibly a little section from the Readfield Historical Society, kind of give them the opportunity to be part of this comp plan, give them a little section here. And I think this is the section I was talking about for the Maine Historic Preservation Commission. Easy conversation. We just reach out to them, see what data is available. What do they have? I know that there's a few comp plans that we've worked on. In China, for example, they had a really, really terrific, a really terrific historical map that we helped them create. Just a part of it was a really nice addition, just showing where some of the historic foundations were. And then obviously just these are the National Register of Historic Places. Has anything changed? Just reaching out to these offices, be like, hey, we're with Readfield. We're working on the comp plan. Give us all the information. And then just really simple questions on the side. I think what I would really need from the committee here is just saying, when you're going through this, if there's anything that's wrong or can be added or expanded upon, I think that'd be really neat. History is like a really cool part of the comp plan. It's not really prescriptive or anything. But with that being said, it does also have a lot of implications to the general recommendations chapter, the future policies. So thinking about what kind of preservation efforts need to continue, looking forward to the future, what type of funding would be needed to be identified, celebration of history and things of that nature. So kind of going down the side is just these types of questions that I had, and some of them are just pretty simple. Some of them are more broad, like this final one where I said, has Readfield referenced historic archaeological sites in their land use ordinances? I think that's something that we consider in later chapters. So this is an example for what kind of review we would be looking at. Thinking about how does it connect to other chapters? What do we want to make a note here? Do we want to save it for the land use? Because I think there's a lot of overlap there. And then the goals and policies is one of the checklist part. So in 2008, you identified these goals and policies. How has this been done? Can it be done differently? And what else needs to be done? So I can leave it on there. We can go through my questions line by line, or it's something that we work over the next 2 months to kind of identify these and things of that. So that's my elevator pitch for the historic and archaeological chapter. Obviously, it's history, so it's kind of the substance there won't change, but a lot of these preservation and conservation efforts are important to review and identify for what else needs to be done. I think I repeated myself enough.
No, that's good. Thank you, Charles. That's great.
The person that I would add for the people who are going to be going through this one, the person that I would add to be a good contact on this, who's involved with the Historical Society, is Dale Potter Clark, and the work that she's done, fairly significant work. If you look around my neighborhood and downtown now and a variety of other places, there are an awful lot of historic plaques that have showed up on buildings, and that's a result of a great deal of historic research that she has done. Every time she researches one of these homes, she does a complete detailed history of the home, the individuals who lived there, the activities that occurred. And I would think that she would be a wealth of knowledge and probably has a boatload of information that could add to what we've got here.
Noted.
Yeah, another area that I think that might be of recent interest relating to history is the Union Meeting House, and they've been making major strides at true renovation and restoration of that building. It's one of many historical buildings in Readfield, but one that I think is worth highlighting. And I know Greg will put some time into that, but they've done a very good job and have been successful in their preservation efforts.
Henry, do you see Greg and me taking this document from Charles with his footnotes and maybe summarizing several points that we think the Historical Society would like to respond to, maybe even the Meeting House lead committee, people like that? How do you see this rolling out?
I think that's exactly right. I think you guys can take it and if your passion is in history, and then seeking out people like Dale Potter Clark and others in the community who could probably offer some support to even, you could even give this document to her and say, have at it and see what you can do to make it better. And then, we're not going to accept everything because you're going to get back, because I know, or you're going to get back about, 40 pages of text, but which will be great. Every school child in Readfield will use this document as the reference for their history of Readfield, which is great. But I think you should use your imagination. I like the idea of maybe a historical map, or maybe some pictures, and some other things like that you feel that you could use to enhance this, to make it a better product, essentially.
Yeah, I'm realizing now I meant to also attach, and I'll do this for the other chapters. This is not a chapter where it's 100% necessary, but the state does have, I think it's good to know what the state requires and expects in terms of their review. And I do apologize, and I will make sure to have it for the other ones. And obviously, like, as of right now, I think a lot of the chapters that exist do already meet the state minimum. So I'm not too worried about missing something. Obviously that has changed over the last 10 years. What are the requirements? But history doesn't change. So I think that's my theme this night, that history doesn't change. So I think it's also going to be important to notice, like, what do we need to do to make sure this chapter is approved by the state, but also what do we want from this chapter? That's something to answer. And so for these types of conversations, going into knowing exactly, we don't need 40 pages of detail for each building. I mean, maybe we can put that into an appendix, possibly. That could be more than necessary, but I think it's kind of, we can ask for a lot and then parse through it.
Greg, do you have some initial thoughts?
No, when we were talking about people, Bob Harris is the actual president of the Historical Society, and he lives right down the road here. He would be an excellent resource too. And I think, David, you and I need to, divvy it up, or at least chat about, so we're not duplicating anything. I think we'll have enough to do without duplicating each other's work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have this chapter, gentlemen, in your email. And that should suffice. If you have any questions, or maybe Charles, you could just send another email to us as a group, just telling us what are those requirements and what are the nice to haves. But I think the idea here is that you take it to your level of passion and your level of outreach that you feel is necessary, and then you report back to the committee. And we will obviously have to agree with what you're doing, but in this particular section, I don't think it's a controversial section. I would
David?
just like. Yep, go ahead.
David?
Yes.
I don't have any passion about writing 40 pages for any building. Just to let you know.
Well, I'll look to you, Greg, because you're the writer in this duo.
Yeah, and I'm definitely open. I think this is kind of a good process chapter to get working with. I think if you go out on those meetings, I will happily accompany you if they're virtual for right now. But in the future, if you have in-person meetings, I'd be more than happy to come to those meetings and help invite you to meetings with, like, the Maine Historic Preservation Commission as well. So I'm here to be a facilitator. If there's meetings that we can't do for whatever reason because they're during the day, I'm happy, and I will definitely, if you just provide me notes, summaries, I can always put those into a chapter as well. So I'm here to be flexible with the chapter lead.
Henry, just a couple of points before we leave this. I believe that this section is very similar in the 2008 plan with the 1997. And it struck me that some of the goal language has been kind of soft pedaled. For example, with the town, the direction for the town's relationship with the Historical Society, there's a sense, unfortunately, by the Historical Society members that they have to be so arm's length from the town leadership. I think that needs to change, consistent with the language that's in there about support for the Historical Society. And I think we can do so much more with that. The other point I'd make is that with regard to the archaeological assets, it seems like the last two comp plans have just taken at face value that somebody did some kind of archaeological dig decades ago, and that's that. And I think there could be value, Greg, for you and me to contact some residents who live along these waterways. I'm thinking of Greg Leimbach, for example. He's been telling me for years that he thinks there may be a burial mound on his property. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for us to bring forward a much more robust approach to these historical and archaeological assets.
Yeah.
And one last comment. There's a phrase in there. There's a sentence. It's three elements. It's identify, preserve, and enhance. And I think in the 1997 plan, there was a lot of good language around historical asset preservation and enhancement in general. And they specifically mentioned the Meeting House and the Jesse Lee Church. But I think we need to be careful as a committee that we don't just let that lie as, you know, the only two assets we're going to muster the town's resources and focus on. Okay, thanks.
Good comments, David. Thank you very much. I would also just point out as part of the process that, you know, the goals and policies section of each one of these chapters, but including this one we're talking about now, is something that will also need to be updated. And those should be, you know, you guys should take a stab at those. You know, whoever's doing that chapter should give a stab at those. And those get rolled into an implementation phase later on in our process, where we decide like who's going to be responsible for, you know, executing some of those goals and policies and how we're going to achieve them. But for now, it's worth going through those goals and policies to make sure that, one, they're still relevant, and two, that they're worded correctly. And I would just caution us, as just a personal preference, is that whenever you have a goal, it should be, you know, it should be a realistic and achievable goal. It shouldn't be a goal that we can't actually get to. So it needs to be, you know, we may have a policy that stretches things out a bit, but if we put a goal in there, you know, a 10-year goal, let's say, for something, we should, in theory, be able to achieve and check that off the list at the next time we do this, or someone else does this.
So no pie in the sky things, yeah.
Henry, there's one other quick question for you and Paula, now that you two members of the planning board are here. Is there any written regulation around protecting historical assets now in the land use ordinance, or has that been considered and rejected, or where does the board stand on that?
I don't have it right in front of me, but I think that one of the site review criteria includes consideration of historic archaeological resources. So if a project, a development comes in for planning board review, that's one of the considerations.
Thanks.
But that's really as far as it, you know, as far as it goes.
Thank you.
So we close this out. Any final comments on this piece?
The only thing that I think I'd add, Henry, is we just had a conversation about goals and goals being achievable. I guess I would respectfully disagree that we not have that all the goals necessarily have to be realistically achievable. I think personally it's okay to have a few aspirational goals sprinkled throughout the plan that you know, may be achievable, and at the same time, you know, they may be just pipe dreams, but at least there's something that we're reaching for.
Okay.
And maybe one other thought on that is that there may be goals that are appropriate for one reason or another to carry over from one plan to another. They may be continuing goals, not something you want to say, okay, we've done that and we're finished, but we want to continue it. Maybe the policies would be modified to some extent to achieve that goal going forward, but you might want to retain the goal.
Yeah, that's a great thought. Those are both great thoughts. Thank you. Good. For the sake of time, we're going to move on. Dennis, thank you for joining.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Oh, Dennis.
We are going to have just a very brief discussion on the public participation plan, which is just an initial discussion. We're not going to get into the resolution here, but I have an ask. So as I already talked about, sort of how we're going to run this whole program, if you will, with outreach to these different groups and different people, and you can certainly reach out, as David and Greg have just been talking about, to different citizens, for example. There's no restriction on that part of it, right? So that in turn, in itself, is part of a public participation process and a plan that we have. The question I have is more about the intended outreach and the frequency of that, and that is not my forte. But I remember in the last meeting, Dennis, you were talking about a Facebook group or some other kind of social media outreach, and I talked to, and in summary, I just did talk to Eric a couple weeks ago, about making sure we post stuff on the website and keep things updated. And he's recording this meeting as an example. So, these are the kinds of things I'm trying to do or think of. And it's just not in my personal wheelhouse about some of this social media stuff. So I was just hoping that somebody would be willing to, think about that and come back with some sort of plan or some sort of thought process about how that would actually be accomplished.
Anything that is shared on the website, the Facebook content generally starts with Eric and what goes on the website of the town, and it kind of blossoms out on Facebook. I have used Facebook in a couple of different ways, but consistent with the town's sort of publication policy, which is, we sort of send out information about the town, town groups, meetings, things like that, information on the town. And so if you haven't liked the town page, you should. It's a great way of sort of staying in touch with things. No guarantee that everyone who likes the page is in Readfield. However, after our last meeting and speaking with Jessica, I did in fact promote the page, and we got a lot more and we had a lot more likes. We got a lot more folks there who like the page. And again, you can sort of zero in on people who identify as Readfieldians. And so that's what we sort of targeted. But the idea that sort of spreading that base, anything you guys, or I guess specifically Henry, if you think something like, hey, I'll send this to you, that's great. If it works and I can share that, absolutely. I think that people, my goal really a lot of this time, and I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but the reason, one of my goals is like, I like the idea of sharing this process with people, because nobody really knows what the comprehensive plan committee really,
right.
Like, it seems, and the other thing is, a lot of people don't know how they can participate.
So I think through a combination of what we've already talked about related to the way we're going to run the committee, in combination with something like that. For example, Dennis, I could see when we're doing when maybe the historical one isn't a good example, but we'll just use it as an example, right? So it's like, this month we're working on the historical and archaeological piece for our comp plan. If you're a historian or have an interest in town's history, get in touch with Greg, or reach out to the committee. Maybe it's less specific. I just want to make sure people know sort of what's going on and what we're doing in the now, and they have to me that seems like a good way to use Facebook.
Absolutely. And what we would do, and I think everybody probably understands this, because a lot of different town groups have their own Facebook page, but the ability to kind of like cluster those. It would be nice if the historical group was also sharing what we were doing, because it was pertinent, but also
Sure.
spreading that around. So absolutely, I'm down.
So for example, when we're doing the recreational side, or the or outdoor space, and we're talking about the trails. The Trails Committee can promote some of that resources as well directly to the community, et cetera, right? So that's just kind of what I was thinking. So in my mind, I just wanted to talk that through, see if anybody had any other ideas, but that's just, at least I'm trying to just make it so it says we're doing a combination of proactive outreach through our individual ownership of these topics, as well as other social media outreaches, in addition to what I would consider the minimally required, posting of things, which is, incredibly passive and boring, but still required. Any other ideas or concerns?
Just a question, Henry, and it's more broad for the group, I guess. We are planning on having a Google Docs shared folder, basically hosted by KVCog for the committee. And I was wondering about, how much of this internal documentation, internal drafts, you'd like to have available on the website. I could post those draft chapters, for example, one by one, or we could potentially give a link that would be a viewing link, but not an editing link, so that folks that we could have on the comp plan page, well, this is how you get to the working documents, and people could have access to all of that. So I'm just wondering, how much of that the committee's interested in sharing, and how, because we can do pretty much all that.
Yeah, if I can, Henry, I can speak to the first part of that. I know that we're kind of piloting a shared folder in our cloud system right now. So we're kind of testing it to make sure that there's no like back end into it, kind of putting our paranoia caps on and figuring out how it could be abused. So that's what I've been doing. And a message I did send to Henry earlier was that link would preferably only be used by committee members. So I think, Eric, the best thing would be we could put the chapter up one at a time. And I'd be happy to take feedback with my email address. But I think at least for the shared folder from the committee side, it would only be for, at least what I'm envisioning, only for the committee. But if there was a desire to have that accessible to the general public, I would have to do a little bit more digging.
Sure.
The other option is to simply make the working document available on the town's website.
Right.
At that point, it's a static document that nobody else is getting into. If they want to click on it and read it, go over it, provide comment, they can easily provide comment via email or however else they want to contact us. But that eliminates some of the potential concerns that you might have about the Google Drive.
Yeah, I think definitely sort of, I'd like to think about that a little bit more. I mean, I don't disagree. I think it's great. I think that through the outreach of each chapter, that we're going to do intentionally, you're going to capture most of those interested parties anyway. But we still want to be transparent about where we're at and what we're doing. So I think yeah, it's great that we're going to have this Google Drive. I think we as a committee should have access to edit, but the rest of the public can either have access to some of it or all of it, or it doesn't really matter to me. I just want to make sure that we're not doing something that's bogging us down, and we're worried about what people are seeing. We just want to make sure we continue to make progress.
So Henry, are we going to have the public have this link to our meetings?
Yes,
they already do. Yeah,
you mean in future?
We are limiting time.
Yes, absolutely, Greg. Absolutely. There'll be much. Now we've got it all sorted out. There was a little bit of a hiccup there just in getting organized, if you will. But now it'll be posted. We'll post the next one very soon. We can post it, a couple of weeks, if not 3 weeks in advance, and get that information out to folks for sure.
Help me understand what we mean by that. Are we going to have the public essentially in the meeting as the same as we are, or is this a webinar where others are able to watch but not necessarily be all on the same screen and directly participating?
Yeah, the public meetings that I've been in, the public can certainly attend these meetings just like as if we were having a meeting at the town hall or something. I mean, there's no prohibition on that. Their participation, however, is limited to only the section of the meeting in which the chair allows them to speak. And we're going to try to do that during a concentrated time during the meeting, so we're not we're not, constantly interrupted. That's not the intent. The intent is to give people an opportunity to speak up. Now, if there's something we're talking about, like the historical piece, and we get to that and they want to talk about the historical piece, they have a comment, for example, then we would recognize that individual specifically for like a minute or two, just to provide that comment.
So
Maybe
until
maybe
that
I'm thinking.
happens, they're like in a waiting room, and you would have to acknowledge them before they can speak.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, they would raise their hand, I believe, there's a way.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
raise
Okay,
your
so we
hand.
are talking about a webinar style rather than, excellent. That's great, because that's very similar to the type of setup that I've been involved in with all my work in the city. Rather than having a screen with 40 people on it, that includes members of the public and members of the committee, that can be extraordinarily confusing.
Well, I think that there's, we can talk about the logistics later, but there's a way you can hide people who don't have their videos on, for example. And so we would ask they turn their videos off and they just listen in during that piece, so you don't see them. And then
But there's also a way for the host to keep their video and their audio off until you bring them in.
yes,
And yeah,
there is.
I have my hand up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand up, but now I see your hand up.
Sorry, Romaine, your time is up. It was a 2-minute thing.
I know. Here I go again. Well, since this is going to be a long, somewhat long process, I hope we're going to have some kind of public hearing that people can attend in person.
Oh yeah.
Okay, all right.
Please.
So I just haven't heard any discussion about that. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's also a requirement under the state law.
Yeah,
So
that's what I was
we
gonna
will.
say.
Well, it's different times, but I think
Yeah.
there are some people who don't, more and more people don't like social media.
Right.
Yeah.
And I did want to, Henry, I don't know if you were going to go this way. So if I'm barking up that tree, please let me know. But to Eric's point, it's required by statute to have at least one public meeting. I think the state office would be, Tom and Ruta would be very understanding, but I think we are in no rush to do it during the pandemic. I know luckily for KVCOG, we had a public session in January and February for our comp plans last year. So we were able to do that. And I think we can kind of, what I would suggest is we do have like a Saturday event after we get through some of the chapters. I think not necessarily the future ones, but kind of the historical and archaeological and natural resources and the chapters with a lot of substance. So we can talk about what does the town want in terms of policies. And I think we are required to have that event, but also that other element of continued public participation along the way is something I would advocate for. I think it's really important that instead of getting it all at once in that only one moment, having it at each phase where we can invite people as well to speak to.
Romaine, that's good. Romaine, we have one on the calendar already. I just don't have it in front of me again, but it's already on there, and we'll probably add another one. So we will definitely do that. We just can't add one right now in the near term just because of the pandemic. But yes, we will do that.
Right.
Yep.
And logistically, my hope at least is that within the next 6 months, we're going to start being able to meet face to face, and people could potentially meet with us, by fall, I hope.
Yeah, my hope too.
Yep.
All right. Looking at the time, it's 7:06. I'd like to take the next 30 minutes and shift to the vision statement, and hope maybe we may or may not need all of that time. But anybody have any other comments or questions about the items we've talked about so far before we move on? I'll take that as a no. Great. So here's what I did. I read a bunch of vision statements, and so let me just make this clear, because I think maybe it was a little unclear, and maybe I'll just start by saying this. So the idea here is that the one notable thing that's perhaps missing from the comp plan is sort of a vision for the community. The comp plan just sort of dives into the matrix of comp plan land. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think it helps to have a broader sort of visioned feel-good statement or statements related to the community and the aspirations and sort of the focus that the community has that sets the stage, and sort of as a best practice. And I think the so you all did a great job providing some thoughts and comments, and some of you provided a lot of comments, and some of you provided some very focused comments, which were helpful. The result of that is that document that I put together, which sort of combines thoughts. Now, for tonight, what I'd like to do is, I'm hoping you've all read it. And if you haven't, I'll share my screen first of all. That would be the minimum that we can do here. And I'm not, I also sent you a document which also showed you what everybody else submitted back to me. And then if it's not in there, it's something that I've incorporated into this document, which I borrowed sort of a template from another community. I can't remember where it was. And then I sort of modified it heavily for Readfield and deleted a lot of unnecessary things. But the idea is that it has this sort of opening statement about the community, and then it has small sections on the things that we value the most in our community that are important to the future. So it's more of a it's more about looking forward and what we want to be, what we are and what we want to be, right? And this is too wordy. So the sections are related to our community, culture, and heritage, our health and valued ecosystems, which is obviously a big part of Readfield, our economy and the different villages in our community that we live in, attainable housing, that's a big thing, connected infrastructure and coordinated, so this would be our schools and maybe some other infrastructure that isn't noted here should be added. And then obviously collaboration of governance, basically with our emergency response services and our well-run town. So I think it's there could be some others we wanted to add, but I think those are probably enough. But what I would ask is tonight, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this approach. And I'd like you to commit to, we're not going to finish this tonight, it's not the objective, but I'd like this document, this particular, think of this as a chapter in the plan, and this piece will come back over and over again as we go through this process. So we don't have to like wrap it up tonight, but I would like your comments on it, and you don't have to provide any super detailed comments tonight if you don't want to, but I'm happy for you to. But I'd like to get your thoughts about the feel of this approach, and I'd like to get your I'd ask that you, if so desired, edit this document that I sent you and send it back to me with some additional suggestions to fine tune it. And then I'm also going to give it to Charles, you and Joel. I think I saw Joel jump on, but I think I'll give it to you guys as well for your massage in addition to that.
Excuse me, Henry, could you bump up the magnification?
Oh, yes.
Thanks. Bottom right-hand corner, I think there. Yeah.
Thank you. How big do you need it?
Oh, that's feeling, that feels good.
You can take your glasses off now.
Right there, nice.
Good.
Well, Henry, I really liked the introductory paragraph because I think it summarizes a lot of the other content. And I recognize the fact that we probably want to be concise. I mean, I don't think there's any issue necessarily with having all of this in the comp plan as long as we focus perhaps more on the a narrowed down statement for each piece and making that initial paragraph or initial set of sentences the focus.
Yep, I agree with that, Eric. That's nice comment. You'll recognize many of your statements throughout this. It was taken from all of you. It's just packaged differently with a few enhancements.
Henry, I wonder if we could get Matt's insight based on the Augusta 2008 plan that has kind of subvisions, one for education and so forth. Matt, I was looking at that the other day, and I was struck as a unique approach, but it seems like a very useful vision tool because you'll have different segments of the population feeling passion for those subvisions. Any thoughts on that, Matt?
No, I agree with you very much, David. That format was one that was created by the consultant that we had working on it. It was Frank O'Hara out of Hollowell. And he was with Planning Decisions at the time back in 2007, 6 and 7. But he owned Planning Decisions back in 2006 and 7. And it was important to the larger comp plan committee to have those subvisions, as you call them, to speak, like you say, to the different areas of the city that were very important. I think that this does some of that. I really do. Talking about the different areas that are important to the community of Readfield. You'll probably noticed in the document that Henry put together that sort of just pulled all of our stuff in. I used that same basic format that Augusta did when I put mine in for Henry to talk about. Basically, it was a 1-sentence or 2-sentence vision statement, and then another 3 or 4 sentences that elaborated on that vision statement. I like that format. This, like I say, to my view, mimics that.
Yeah, I'm glad you see that. I see that, Henry, and what you've done here, and I think the community is going to appreciate this approach to sharing and communicating the vision.
Can I ask a few questions?
Absolutely. Of course.
So these subvisions, are these what these like the sort of icon headings are? Is that what those are?
Yeah, you could call it a subvision. So
Okay.
this top part right here that I'm highlighting is
Okay,
is sort of the main sort of volley, right?
Gotcha.
That's
Okay, yeah.
And then this sort of ties the comp plan to the town, to what we are, kind of thing, right?
Gotcha.
And then each one of these is sort of the highlighted subsection of that is a theme. It's themed throughout the comp plan, right? There are these
Gotcha.
kinds of things. Let's take the ecosystem one, the healthy, and we could change the title. It doesn't have to be this title, but the idea is that we're stewards of the environment. We have lots of lakes, resources, trails. This is too wordy. I'll tell you that right now. We got to shorten it. But my point is, we want to be a walking city, a healthy city, that kind of stuff, right?
Gotcha.
And so that gets captured under this in just a couple of sentences, a little bit like the one above it, a couple of sentences, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like enhancing
chapters, a little like a little like an outline that makes it easy and digestible for people to understand.
Yeah, what Readfield is, right? So you could give this to somebody, and then they would sort of have a vision of what Readfield's all about, right?
Right.
And what the priorities are.
This
is not supposed to be like your exactly your goals or exactly your. I mean, it is sort of goal. It's an inspiring type document rather than a specific goal that you're trying to put in here, right?
Right.
That's what the comp plan is. Later on in the document, it comes for housing. It comes back later with specific goals about housing. But housing is important to us, and so that's why it's up here in the front, right?
Right. Yes. Well, good job. It's a Herculean effort to put all of that together. So
yeah, really.
So, floor is still open for other suggestions and comments. But as you're thinking, I would suggest you please read this thoroughly. It'll come back. You don't have to do it right now, but it'll come back again. But if you have comments or edits, please do so and offer them and give it back to the committee. This will also go through the public process, so people in the community will also have an opportunity to contribute to this document.
Henry, if we do an edit on this, do you want us to send it to you and then you distribute it, or should we just do a reply all to everybody?
I would suggest you just let's just send it to me for now, and I'll combine them all into one document, and then I'll send that back out to you, in a timely manner when I get enough of them. If nobody replies but you, Dennis, then we're good. Then I'll make sure everybody gets your comments.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you.
Other thoughts, observations? Can't all be good. Come on, somebody's got to have some criticism.
I think.
No, I'm going to be.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No,
That's
no,
okay.
no.
I'm gonna echo what everybody said. I think it's a real good start, and I think you're right. It just has too many words in it, and it needs to be boiled down to its core.
And I feel your passion to make that happen.
Ah, lots of passion and little time.
Well, we've got time, so we don't have to do it next week. But think about how you would make every single sentence in here, and every word should be a meaningful word. So it should be very concise. It shouldn't ramble. Greg, you were going to say something?
I wasn't. I am, I guess. First, thank you. When being a teacher for so many years, and when you ask people to put their thoughts in out to the public in a writing format, it's always dangerous. It's a huge risk, and I admire the courage to do it. And I'm going to be honest with you. I read it through very quickly this afternoon, and I'm going to spend more time with it, I promise. But it seems long. If you recall mine was, the one I submitted was maybe, I don't know, 100, 150 words, looking for a vision, mission statement. But I like the format of this, I really do. And I look forward to rereading it and possibly offering suggestions. But again, thank you. To put your work out there like that takes a lot of courage.
Thanks.
So Greg, I'm picturing that yours was so short. You had a big red heart, and it said, "I heart Readfield."
That's actually too long. Mine was shorter than that.
Oh, okay.
But happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. Now that we mentioned colors.
Yeah, that's right. It is St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, so from that perspective, I would encourage us to try and keep these little subsections as sort of like a summary, statement. But I would agree they could be more concise individually. So ideally, this thing would fit on one page when you're done. That's how I would look at it, right? But I think a one-page sort of statement about the town is probably appropriate.
And just as a warning to everyone, brevity is not my forte. So please, anything that you see from me, hack away at it.
And
Henry, thanks very much. You just really did a great job for us. You really took us way ahead. Thank you.
You've been asking this for quite a while, David. So it's good to see it realized, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
Romaine, you were going to say something?
oh, I
Oh,
was
sorry, I turned it off. Did you want it back on again?
no. I was just going to say, don't reduce it by making the font smaller.
Oh.
Doesn't
No,
count.
well, apparently I had to have it at 150% so we could all see it. So, but I'll make sure that, yeah, it's at 11 point, which is your standard text size nowadays. So, I think it should stay at that size. Yes, it won't be 9 point. That's not going to go down there. All right. So so in conclusion, then, if you don't have any more comments, our homework and our conclusion of the meeting here. So our homework is to please take a close read through this vision statement and reduce. So in other words, you don't have to, if you see something incredibly omitting, feel free to add it, a particular statement or something you'd like to see worded differently at your suggestion. But the idea is to really boil this down to the core of what we want. And that would be great. I would also ask that KV Cog take a look at it as well and do the same process.
Absolutely.
The second piece of homework is then for Greg and David to take that historical piece and archaeological piece and begin the outreach process as you see fit. With in the back of your mind, you've got a 2-month turnaround, so that will be in May. We will bring that up again. And if through your process you're feeling you need a little more time, I'd hope not, though, because it's not too much, that piece. I think May would be quite realistic. But if just keep me apprised of what you need, and we'll make sure you get on the agenda in May.
David?
Yes.
If it's okay with you, I would like to take Matt's suggestion with Paula about tag teaming it. I don't see myself as the necessary leader with this, with our section.
Yeah, let's be in
Is that
touch.
okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and if there's another committee member, sorry, Charles, if there's another committee member who wants to jump in, but by all means, you know, this is just supposed to provide focus so we don't overwhelm everyone, right? So if you feel underwhelmed, by all means, step up.
Right, and I'll send out obviously the statute. I forgot the state statutes for the historic and archaeological section, so I'll send that out as well as just a few ideas I have about the outreach and things of that nature.
Great,
I'll send it out tomorrow.
That'd be very helpful, Charles. Absolutely. Just send it to you have the emails of everybody here. Just send it to the whole committee.
Yes, I believe I do. Yeah.
And then I think those are the primary things we're going to work on. I will make sure the next meeting gets announced a little earlier, but it's just to confirm with everybody here, it is the third Wednesday of every month. And it'll either be 6 or 6:30. I'll do a little more polling, but you know, if you feel passionately one way or the other, let me know. But it'll be roughly at the same time. The next meeting, we're going to be starting to talk about land use, Paula. So, and Matt. So that'll be a big topic to start tackling. So we're just going to start introducing it, and I would ask for your guidance because both of you are much, you know, particularly you, Matt, with your job. You know, you're well in tune with that thought process, and so I would really, you know, help guide us through that, and let's begin that process at the next meeting.
Henry, excuse me. At the first meeting, Joel handed out or sent out a multi-page document called Selected Strategies for Managing Growth in Designated Rural Areas.
Oh, yeah.
So will that be commented on or summarized? Where's that going to fit in this part?
Yeah, that's a fairly extensive document, from what I recall. I would suggest that gets woven into sort of all the discussions that we're having individually as we go along where it makes sense. But I would encourage everybody to read that. It's got a lot of really great information in it, but it's also, I wasn't planning on having like a separate topic discussion on it, but we could do that at the next meeting, David, if you felt that was valuable to the committee.
No, I was imagining that you and Paula would just summarize it and say, you know, the planning board has considered most of this.
Yeah.
You know, something like that.
Paula, do you have a copy of it still?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any initial thoughts?
No.
Okay.
I was going to say, I think the committee could at the very least, you know, like if there's things in there that look useful, you could kind of pick out the things that might be useful. You don't have to address everything. You can just pluck out the useful information and utilize that as best as we can.
Yeah. Henry, when you talk about introducing the land use topic at the next meeting, is your thought that it would look similar to the way the historic and archaeological piece was presented tonight, or are you thinking something different?
Yeah, no, I was thinking that KVCOG, this is the time when KVCOG will provide their thoughts on our existing comp plan section.
Okay.
And from 2009, and that piece will then be, they will present that to us, you know,
Okay.
in writing a week or so before the meeting, and then we will then discuss it at the meeting. And then from that meeting, we will leave the next meeting with some more actionable items that need to occur, similar to what we just did tonight on the historical side.
And so perhaps part of that could be touching upon this, you know, the document that you're interested in, David.
Yeah.
And Paula, I'll probably reach out in an email or something to you to have a conversation, start a conversation about the topic prior to the next meeting, just so that we have a little pre-prep.
Yeah.
The one thing I haven't done yet, which I do have a copy of, Eric, but I would ask KV Cog to maybe do this as part of their initial review, is compare what we've achieved to what, the goals that we have. That documentation, and it would be great if you guys, when you do your initial review, can say it looks like these things have been achieved and these ones haven't. And so it sort of provides a checklist of where we're actually at in the process. So we didn't do that for this section, but I would ask that we do it for the future pieces.
Has Eric, that was a document that Eric described at a previous meeting that the select board uses. Has that been shared? I don't remember seeing that.
I know I shared it with Henry. I'm not sure if I shared it with everybody.
Yeah.
I think it may have been sent out in like December or something too, as part of the initial packet. But I can make sure I get it to everybody. I'll make sure everybody gets it.
Yep.
The one thing I noticed, over the years, looking at that, and that's one of the things that I'm glad we've been doing, is looking at those goals. We have a lot of goals that are actually, as Paula said, ongoing goals. Things that that will probably never finish, but we always want to keep in the front of our mind. And that's just an observation, that we do have a lot of those type of activities that just, and maybe we want to change how we shape some of those goals so they can become more definitive, right? It was one of the challenges that I had, was trying to say, well, is this done or not done? Is it, how long is this going to continue? So maybe we could look at those when we're doing our goal setting in our different sections, and just say, are these, as Henry said, are these the right goals? Do they really get us to where we want to be? And I honestly would like to see a few more defined, time-limited type goals in our next comp plan.
Eric, the document that you're talking about, the select board document, was that the document that encompassed all of the goals and policies and all the different sections of the report, or was it just the select pieces that the select board was working on specifically?
I think it was everything. I'm fairly certain it was everything. Yeah, it was short, medium, and long-term goals, and then probably, a dozen to 20 per section.
Yeah.
So I think it was for everybody, but.
Yeah, my recollection is that each of the boards, commissions, each of the entities in town that was responsible for implementation of certain pieces of this, they were keeping track also of, when things were completed and so forth. And I didn't know if all of that went into this document that you're talking about, so it was comprehensive.
Well, I'll look. I think it may be there was something about speed limits for the lakes in there. So a lot of stuff, but I will check and see if there are other documents out there.
Good.
Henry, there's another point, not to get into it tonight, but the town website has this multi-page document, the guidance for BCCs, boards, commissions, committees, and most of the town's committees and boards have a section in there and a mission statement.
Yeah.
And so I just don't want to lose track of our opportunity to interface, relate this vision mission work with those, and make them agree.
Yeah, I don't think they're the same thing entirely, those statements. I mean, their committee vision or committee mission may be different than the way it would be incorporated into the comp plan. So, but I hear what you're saying, and I think though, but through the outreach of every single person on this committee through these chapters, I think there's an opportunity to discuss with each of those groups for sure. And it's a good time for those groups to also think about and they are, the open space plan as an example. There's other things in the CIP plan. There's other things going on in the community that are being talked about and revised that are going to be incorporated at some point into the town's overall documentation of its direction.
Thanks.
All right, so We're at an hour and a half and 3 minutes. So I'm tired. I don't know about you, but I'm getting done. We've covered everything I had on the agenda. Were there any closing comments or anything you were burningly desired to talk about? Keeping in mind brevity is important at this point. Okay, well, I would ask that you keep your homework in mind, and thank you for all your replies and what you did do between the last meeting and this one. It was very helpful, and we've moved the ball, and we look forward to the next one.
Thank you, Henry, for all your work.
Yeah.
Okay, have
Thanks
a great
lot,
night.
Henry.
Thanks.
Thanks so
Have a good
much.
one, everyone.
Night.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Happy
Good night.
St.
Good night.
Patrick's Day.
Yeah, happy St. Patrick's Day.
You got green on, Romaine. Good looking.
I'm the only, I'm the only one.
You're it,
I'm not
Roman.
Jewish.
I figure I got red hair. That counts, right? That's close enough. Yeah. Good night.